am Reverend Kenyatta Chinwe. I'm the Faith Advocacy Coordinator for Sister Song, the Women of Color Reproductive Justice Collective. I'm also the Amplify Coordinator for Sister Song, and we are one of the 7 orgs that Rula mentioned as a part of the Amplify Collaborative. And I am also a founding member and interim steering committee co-chair for Sacred, the Spiritual Alliance for Communities for Reproductive Dignity. And I am very happy to be here and hope that we can have a robust conversation about reproductive justice.
Thank you all. So let's get started. We're gonna jump into the conversation. Like I said before, there are some things that have happened over this summer that has impacted our access to abortion. And let's see, Rula and Kenyatta, do you think you could give us a summary of what has happened?
You want me to go first? As of 2 weeks at this point, the House Bill 41, which is the 6-week abortion ban that was passed in 2019, has gone into effect. And so it is now unlawful to receive or to perform abortions past 6 weeks or cardiac activity. Yeah, cardiac activity. I think you get the word. The way that it is impacting Georgians is we are now in a situation where most people are not going to be able to access the abortions and the reproductive health care that they need. But it is a very expansive issue because Georgia also served as a hub for this region in the Southeast. And so it's not just affecting Georgians, but actually the whole region in terms of access to abortion care in this region. We are now down to 2 states where access is still available, which would be Florida, and they have access up to 15 weeks, and North Carolina, which is access up to 20 weeks. And so this decision—
Until a month ago, states were not allowed to ban abortion outright. That was not something that they could do constitutionally because in 1973, the Roe versus Wade decision of the Supreme Court found that it was unconstitutional for states to ban abortion completely and that they could only restrict abortion access in certain situations. They had to meet certain conditions to say that a restriction on abortion access was legitimate or justified, or that the interest of the state in restricting access somehow outweighed the interest or the consequence to the person who's pregnant for not being able to make their own choice. 49 years after Roe versus Wade, a new case came up to the Supreme Court that never should have been heard in the first place if the court was going to uphold Roe versus Wade. It was a case from Mississippi that said abortions can't be obtained here after 15 weeks. That definitely went against what Roe versus Wade said. But the Supreme Court, basically a lower court said, well, that's not constitutional. And the people who were pushing for the law, the state of Mississippi, appealed it all the way up to the Supreme Court. And when the Supreme Court said, okay, we'll take a look at this, that was basically our signal.
Yep.
More than 6 months ago that they were really planning to readjust everything we thought we knew about what states could and couldn't do, what they can legally do. But I want to stop too and say, before this, in those 49 years, access was not equal or always available, and the people who suffered most from a lack of access and resources being able to make the choices that they wanted, whether that is to have an abortion or to have a safe delivery and be a parent, usually was poor people, people of color, people who are in the outskirts, do not live in cities where healthcare is good, and that has just continued to be true. The overturn of Roe versus Wade is not the first time that abortion is now made inaccessible, right. But it's going to get worse because of this too.
Right, and it also will exacerbate other reproductive concerns that we have in the state. For instance, the maternal mortality issues that we have in the state. It has been proven that restrictive abortion laws only exacerbate maternal outcomes. And so having this law go into effect is just going to exacerbate the issue that we already have in our state around maternal mortality.
Which we are number 1, if you didn't know. We are Georgia's number 1. We rank number 1 for the largest mortality maternal mortality rate. I think we were number 2, and I think maybe a couple of weeks ago we bumped up to.
We were number 2, but now we're number
1.
We have the worst.
So with this new bill in place, which is technically called HB 481, but you might hear it by the 6-week ban. Can someone describe this experience of someone getting an abortion now that that ban has been put into effect?
I think I can.
Okay.
But it's not going to be a straight line. So when you think you might be pregnant, I mean, people have different experiences with this, but a lot of times when you think you might be pregnant, the first thing that you notice might be, I'm feeling a little different on the inside in a way that I can't quite explain, or my period didn't come when it was supposed to, my menstrual cycle is late or irregular, spotting happened instead of a full few days, or you might feel tender in some places. Whatever it is, at that point, if you are, we're going to say lucky, if you are lucky and you start to have those signs pretty early in pregnancy, then what you're going to be able to do is a pretty straightforward experience of having an abortion before that 6-week limit in Georgia. So it used to be, up until a few weeks ago, you were able to get an abortion up till part of the 2nd trimester, the 20th week of after fertilization, which is also called the 22nd week from your last normal period that you did have. We won't get into that, but if you work in an OB's office or anywhere that does ultrasounds, 22 weeks after your last period that you did have means 20 weeks after fertilization. So translate that to what the ban now says. 6 weeks after your last normal period is 4 weeks after fertilization. That's really early, and a lot of people don't have those signs and symptoms early on. So if you did have those signs and symptoms, you would say, I'm going to go take a pregnancy test, or I'm going to go to a clinic, get a pregnancy test. Then you may decide that you want to have an abortion, and if you do, you're going to hopefully find a correct provider, a place that actually provides abortion care. There are these places out there that are anti-abortion centers, and they call themselves pregnancy centers, and they are not. They don't give real health care, and you might accidentally stumble into one of those places. That would be bad. It really slows you down, because they'll try to tell you, oh, you're in the right place, but you just got to wait 2 more weeks. Let's say you find the abortion clinic. I get there, hopefully there's an appointment today, or the doctor's available today, or tomorrow, or the next day, but I can't go get my appointment on that day. I have to get an ultrasound, and then I have to be told a certain number of pieces of information that state lawmakers decided that the healthcare provider has to tell you. That's kind of strange because they are professionals at the clinic and they know how to tell you what you're supposed to know about your care. But nevertheless, then you have the clock starts 24 hours after you read or hear that information. That's when you can finally have your abortion. So hopefully the ultrasound that you had yesterday said you do not have fetal cardiac activity, you are at or below the point where the abortion would be banned, you are not yet there, and you can have your abortion. An abortion procedure itself is really simple. You can either have a 5-minute, for most procedures are about 5 minutes long in the office at the clinic, and then you go home and you take care of yourself with a heating pad. And excuse my voice, y'all. I had laryngitis earlier this week. Or you can do an abortion with medication. So that is a series of pills. You take 4 pills of one kind called mifepristone. I don't want to get this right, so I'm not going to say the dosage. And then you take 2 pills of misoprostol afterwards. And so one of those pills stops the pregnancy from continuing to grow, and the other set of pills helps you contract your uterus so that you have basically, it feels like a miscarriage, it looks like a miscarriage. And you do that at home, but you get the medications normally at the doctor's office. Some places and with some providers, you can get it in the mail after doing a virtual visit. Okay, so what if they detect fetal cardiac activity because you are past 6 weeks, you're past the time when those cells that are eventually going to become a heart have started to, right, they're just dividing, they're multiplying. There is not a heart yet, but the people who passed this bill misleadingly called it a heartbeat bill. So what if on the ultrasound, they see, yes, there's fetal cardiac activity. At that point, they say, I'm sorry, and I know you already paid $120 to get your ultrasound here, but you're going to have to find another place to get care, or you're going to have to stay pregnant. If you decide that you are determined you're gonna find the resources, you're gonna find a way, you're gonna cross state lines to another place where care is available, depending how many weeks you are, no longer can you get care beyond 6 weeks in Alabama or Tennessee, Louisiana, Mississippi. So you would go to North Carolina or to Florida, and at that stage it really depends on what resources you have, and if you can find someone to stay with, or if you have money for a hotel, or if you know about abortion funds, which can help you pay for the procedure or find a way to travel if you get in touch with them. So just for y'all here, if you know anybody who in their pregnancy is not sure that they want to continue their pregnancy, they wanted an abortion and they thought that they couldn't get one, ineedanabortion.com is the one website that we're telling everybody about, because it includes abortion funds, places that will help you with a ride, but that are trusted, not some stranger, and clinics all over the country. And so no matter what kind of situation you're in, you can find resources at that website. I'm gonna stop there.
Very thorough.
It's very thorough. I know we've been here, this isn't one of my questions, but you were very thorough, so I don't want to leave any stones unturned. In some states, people are being prosecuted for crossing state lines.
There are some states where they want to be able to do that,
They're trying to.
but so far the federal government is saying you can't do that.
Okay, so you can cross state lines if the state you are in has a ban and you're past the week ban of whatever the week is, you can travel across states to find access. And like Rula said, if you need help finding resources, go to ineedabortion.com. Or is it I need an A?
It's both I need an A or I need an abortion.
Okay. Then, so we use a lot of terms in our work, from choice to reproductive health, to reproductive rights, to reproductive freedoms. Raise your hands how many people have heard this. So it's a framework. Raise your hand if you know if you're familiar with the reproductive justice framework. Okay. So for those who aren't, Kenyatta, can you explain what the reproductive justice framework?
Sure. So reproductive justice is a framework and a movement. It was conceived in 1994 by 12 Black women who recognized that the larger repro movement at the time, which was based in choice, did not address all of the needs of Black, Indigenous, poor, women of color, and the way that other issues affect their reproductive lives. They understood that more things did affect the reproductive lives of people outside of rights to and even access to abortion. There was always issues of environment and social issues that also impact those the lives of the reproductive lives of people. And so they came up with the frame reproductive justice. I like to say as a shortcut, is the place where reproductive rights and social justice meet. The reproductive justice framework sits on 4 tenets that are based in the human rights framework. We in the reproductive justice movement believe that everyone has the right to have a child, to not have a child, to parent the children that they have in safe, sustainable communities, free from interpersonal and state-sanctioned violence, and to have bodily autonomy. And those 4 tenets are the framework upon which the movement for reproductive justice is based. And so understanding those tenets helps you to see how intersectional, inherently intersectional, the fight for reproductive justice is, because we understand that things like fighting for social justice, for racial justice, for immigrants' rights, for criminal justice reform, for environmental rights, for labor justice is all reproductive justice, because all of these things affect the reproductive lives of people. And so we at Amplify use that as our guiding framework And Sister Song is actually the oldest reproductive justice organization in the country, and I get to do my work there with them.
Thank you. You talked about intersectionality, and I think that's a good place for us to go into. What other issues intersect with reproductive justice? And this is an open question.
Well, as I mentioned just now, there's pretty much everything that affects our ability to have healthy and whole lives intersects with reproductive health rights and justice. I think the ones that come like at the top of our mind, because they are things that we are actively working for here in Georgia, are things like criminal justice reform, because everybody deserves to be able to send their children out and know that they're going to come home, and so that's just one of them.
Also, obviously, as we're talking about, procedures and going and having a relationship with a healthcare provider, if you're in a situation like this, healthcare and advocating for quality and inclusive healthcare in this state is a fight that has continued because Governor Deal chose not to expand Medicaid, and Governor Kemp has maintained that status quo. So that means that 1.4 million Georgians can't access health insurance. I think it's more than half of the counties in Georgia don't have an OBGYN. So not only are you uninsured, you're figuring out if you are to have this child, how many hours you have to drive just to get quality care. If Governor Kemp were to expand Medicaid today, 560,000 Georgians could access health insurance. When you're looking at pregnancy care throughout the pregnancy, care for your family after the child has come into the world, if that doesn't exist, and now you're also eliminating that choice of having that child, the debt that will be accumulated for families can impact generations. And so talking about reproductive justice goes hand in hand with healthcare and healthcare equity in the state.
Along with healthcare, you have childcare. When you think about children being born, you have to think about the care and the raising of those children. So when you think about children being born, think about the fact that that child is being born into a family. A family needs to have access to things like fair housing, economic justice, environmental justice, because what type of environment is the child being raised in? When we talk about environments that are free of interpersonal and state-sanctioned violence, what situations are we putting children into? Where are we going to raise our children, and how are we going to raise them if you already have a society that won't even consider expanding childcare? So if you're talking about making people have children, you have to talk about expanding childcare. As it stands right now in the state of Georgia, families who have infants, and I'll say children from 0 to 4, in preschools and preschool programs, they are paying more for tuition for their preschoolers than they would pay for their adult children to go to a 4-year private school in Georgia. Families in Georgia pay on average $740 per month per child for child care. And then when you have CAPS, which is the programs for parents and students here in Georgia, CAPS does not go year round. There is at least a 2 or 3 month period where CAPS is not covering. And then if you have your child being taken care of by a family, friend, or neighbor, which we call FFN care, that person can't get a CAPS payment, so then you're out of luck. You have to depend on anybody who will give you charity, really, in order to help you care for your child, or you quit your job and keep your child at home. So when you talk about reproductive justice and making people have children, you have to include childcare in this conversation, because not only are you talking about CAPS, you're talking about the food and nutrition program for adults and children. How are you going to feed these children? Food program only goes for a certain amount of time, and they have not extended that food program. But think about people who live in areas that have been designated as food deserts. Food insecurity is a real thing, and that goes to child care. There are many children who are in K through 12 education who only get a decent meal at school. Think think about health care, many children 0 to 4 don't get a medical home until they enter Head Start or early Head Start. Fortunately, in that program, the goal of Head Start is to make sure not only that you have a medical home for your child, but a medical home for your family. But Head Start programs and early Head Start programs are now few and far between in the state of Georgia. If you live anywhere near Augusta, if you live in Evans, you've got to go to Augusta for your nearest Head Start program. That's 30 miles away. So you're having a problem accessing health care, you're having a problem accessing child care, but someone's making you have a child, and now think about the environment where you're living, because you can't get affordable housing in any area that's not run down. So you have children walking to school and children being taken to school where they have to walk along routes where pollution is rampant. So think about what your children are breathing in. You're going into a school building where up until this past legislative session, they were not testing air quality or lead in the water. So when you think about child care, reproductive justice, intersectionality, we're talking about health care. Do you know that the #1 cause of mental health issues in children in school is lead exposure? When you think about lead exposure, rates of autism and other cognitive disabilities that happen to children, lead exposure is the #1 cause. And there are some places in Georgia that have lead exposure rates higher than Flint, Michigan. So we can't leave child care out of that conversation. When you talk about social justice, mass incarceration, you know that there's a school to prison pipeline. Our children are already being targeted from the time that they're in 3rd grade to go into a carceral system that's gonna make money off of their bodies. They are going to be counted in a system when they're in jail, in the census when they're in jail, but they won't be able to vote. So when you look at all of this that's happening with reproductive justice, look at the people who are most disproportionately affected, being Black women. The war in this country right now is not only on women, but particularly Black women. Because when it comes down to it, Black women are the pillars of our community. When you see all of this Black girl magic happening these days, this is what our society that we live in, which is an inherently racist and white supremacist society, this is what they want to prevent. Because forget about taking the Black man out of the home. The Black woman has already stood up and said, we are going to do it regardless of who's here, regardless of who's not here, regardless of what we have. So laws are being put in place, because think about it. Democrats won an election this past year because of Black women in Georgia, right? If we're just gonna talk about Georgia, they won an election because of Black women in Georgia. And without going too far into the political side of it, just understand that everything that's being done, this war on Black women in particular, is to keep us in a place where our communities will be continually oppressed, where that wealth gap will continue to grow. When you look at laws like vagrancy and loitering, laws that were put in place during Reconstruction to make sure that we could continually criminalize Black people to put us in another form of slavery, legal slavery by being in the carceral system, those laws were created because Black people were coming out of slavery. Many of them, if you were not already an indentured servant, you had nowhere to live. So how can we put them back into slavery? We make these laws that say it's illegal for you to hang in front of this door for longer than 5 minutes. It's illegal for you to move from place to place and not have a permanent home. But we're gonna make sure that you can afford a permanent home. So those types of laws, which we still have on the books, by the way, laws about loitering, laws about vagrancy, that are created to make sure that Black people can remain in a carceral system of legal slavery, that line can be clearly drawn when you go right back to reproductive justice. And let's not even talk about maternal mortality, because if you're talking about child care and you're talking about giving fetuses rights, now talk about the care not only in the womb but postpartum. Because if you're going to make this fetus have rights, you're going to care for this child and make sure that this child has care while the mother's pregnant. We don't see that a lot of times because most people here in Georgia, most people don't even get prenatal care until the last trimester. So when you're looking at statistics like that and you think about the rate of women, Black women in particular, who are dying, not only during childbirth, but after childbirth, because white doctors don't believe us, They don't think that black women know their own bodies or know what's going on with them, and they tell them things like, oh, it's all right, oh, it's normal, just lie down, just rest up, just put a heating pad on. But then they go back to a doctor, and most times an emergency room, because their doctors are blowing them off. And the next thing you know, they're on an operating table and their lives are gone.
Yeah. You know, the BMMA's research actually showed that the number one reason for the maternal mortality rate here in Georgia is the lack of being believed by
Yes.
the healthcare professionals.
Yes.
That is actually why
Yes.
so many
There is a
black women are dying.
great documentary out right now called Aftershock that is playing on Hulu, and it talks about maternal mortality and black maternal mortality in particular. I'm gonna hop off my soapbox because I could go on. I could go on forever and ever and ever about it, but the main thing that's being done is people are trying to put blinders on us to look at abortion access through a singular lens of abortion being a moral issue. It's not. It's not just that. Absolutely.
As a faith leader, we have to actually pinpoint the nucleus of the strategy, which is a white Christian nationalism that has perpetuated us being in the space that we are right now. For 40 years, the white evangelical movement has used the issue of abortion to gain political power, but it never had anything to actually do with saving any lives or actually having to do with abortion. It actually had to do with white evangelicals in the early 1980s being held accountable for the segregation that was happening and running rampant in their evangelical-run schools. And they looked for a strategy that would allow them to gain political power so that they would not only would they not be held accountable for what they were already doing, but would have political power to push their agenda even further. And they picked up a cause that had little to no accountability, which is this cause for the unborn, because when you're advocating for the unborn, there's no one to hold you accountable. Like if you were advocating for the homeless, then the homeless could say, hey, you're not really advocating for us. If you're advocating, for families, then families can be like, hey, you're not really advocating for us. So they picked up a cause that had little to no accountability, but had the inherent emotional charge so that they could actually recruit people across demographics, including black people, to push their agenda for the political power that they want to gain. And so where we sit right now, dealing with voter suppression, dealing with gerrymandering, dealing with police brutality run amok, is a direct result of 40 years of white evangelical strategy of a white Christian nationalism, because that is where they are trying to push this country. And we are on the brink of losing our whole sense of democracy in this country because of this white Christian nationalism that says that anybody that is not white and male should not have rights.
That's right. That's right. And when you look at all of this and you think about reproductive justice and child care, you cannot leave out of the conversation the fact that we have many children who have special needs who are not being serviced in this state.
Yes.
The GNETS program in Georgia is severely lacking. How do I know? Because I'm an IEP advocate. I work with families of children with special needs, and I have a child myself who has an IEP that's ironclad because I did it myself when I lived in New Jersey, and I brought it here with me to Georgia. They have nothing here that mirrors what she got in New Jersey. And when you think about the fact that the GNETS program is largely tailored to meet the needs of children who have cognitive disabilities only, but when you look at the state of mental health and the fact that our children more and more are experiencing mental health challenges, especially coming out of the pandemic, things that have been brought to light because before they were being ignored in schools.
Right.
Parents got pushed away when they said, hey, I want my child evaluated. Now, children were home, the parents could see them more, they could pinpoint, this is happening, that's happening, I really need an evaluation for my child, and they were hitting brick walls. They're still hitting brick walls. There's been no expansion of mental health services for children in Georgia. So what are you talking about, making people have children and you won't provide ways to care for those children adequately? You're not doing anything for the children that are already here, but when you think about bringing more children here, how are you going to make those services available from the time they get here? Because Head Start and early Head Start programs don't have funding to do that. Medicaid does not cover those mental health services. So when you talk about occupational therapy, you want to talk about physical therapy, you want to talk about cognitive behavioral therapy for children, where is it coming from? You are deliberately putting children into adverse situations where they will not thrive. So
because it's about having a permanent underclass.
Yes,
like I said, it is rooted in this white Christian nationalism that says that white men should run everything and all of the rest of us should follow in line.
None at all.
Can we bring it back around to another aspect of RJ intersections? When children are experiencing they have adverse experiences, adverse situations, maybe their health's not doing great, maybe there's so much, right? You don't have great nutrition, or maybe you're getting into a fight. A lot of these things, then it turns back around and gets blamed on the parents. When these things are happening disproportionately to Black children and children of color, parents of color, mothers of color
Are criminalized.
Turned into criminals.
Absolutely.
And criminal or not, separated from their children for supposedly not being fit parents. All of this is a system that is making it disproportionately likely that those families of color, our families, are going to be separated, told that we can't parent our own kids. So the piece of the reproductive justice tenets that says, it's a long sentence, right, but parent the children that we do have in safe and sustainable environments, free from violence. Parent the children that we have was actually, that was part of it, because it was like, yes, Black women and women of color and people of color need the freedom to not have a child just like anybody else. We also need the freedom to have children, because at different times in history in this country, sometimes people of color, especially Black women, were forced to have children. Sometimes they were forced to get sterilization. And many times, the children that they did have were taken from them. So that's the piece that's like, it's not just about what does or doesn't come out of our body, it's about our life, the choice that we have to build our family.
That's right.
Of course, it's also about our sex life, it's about the community ties that we want to build, and it's from when I'm little to when I'm hitting puberty to when I'm having kids or not having kids to when I'm going through menopause, all the whole cycle of the life. But we don't get equal access to flourishing across life stages because of the system that sets some of us up first to encounter challenges and then to be deemed as we failed or our parents failed us, and we need to have more trauma thrust into our lives.
Absolutely.
Which just brings in the fourth tenet, which kind of encapsulates that all, which is bodily autonomy, which says I get to make the sovereign decisions about my body and my life without state intrusion. Because if we know nothing else, especially as Black and brown people, that it has never been a good idea for the government to have control over our bodies, ever.
Never. I mean, it goes back to the days of slavery and the so-called father of obstetrics and gynecology. You literally took slaves and operated on them and their reproductive parts without any type of anesthesia, no consent. And that was where we got this whole notion of Black women don't feel pain because we've been strong from day one. And whether we cried out or not, because there were times when we were asking not to have these procedures done on us, times when Black women were saying, no, I don't want that done. And those were the times when they did all that they could do, they ruined her body, and then they sterilized her. Yes, sterilized her. So we have been for centuries, not only the guinea pigs, but we've been neglected. Our voice has been neglected, and we have not been given a voice when it comes down to our own bodies. From being made to have the slave master's baby, being made to nurse his bad behind children, being made to comfort and give him the things that he wanted against our will. Black women have been it in every piece of history. In all times, it's been about us. I don't know if it's simply because they see the greatness in us. I don't know if it's the fact that they see that no matter what they do, they can't keep us down.
All right.
I don't know if it's the fact that you just envy what we have that much. But either way, the black woman is the target. Black society is the target, because even when we did pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, every black society that flourished was burned down, it was flooded, it was terrorized. People were massacred simply because black people lived and thrived and made a community for each other. We made everything that was being kept from us. So here we go again with laws that are meant to oppress us. And you know what? No, you can't have freedom over your body. Because if I give you freedom over your body, you're going to raise up another generation that's going to do great things too. And they're going to raise up another generation that's going to do it even bigger. So I have to, in some legal way, make sure that I can keep you in shackles, whether it's figurative or literal.
There is also Black feminist theory says that we center the needs of the most marginalized because when they are free, all of us are free.
Yes.
And what the thing that I want to point out is, especially when I talk about the white Christian nationalism, we are definitely the target, but their numbers are the goal.
Yes.
And so they are really not concerned whether we live or die in our pregnancies, because the goal is to increase the numbers of white babies that has steadily declined over the last 30 years. Because middle-class white women are actually making the choice to not be mothers. And so we also have to recognize that though we are the target, we're not the only aim.
Right.
And so this fight is one that is inherently intersectional, and that focusing on us as the main target gets everybody free, including the white women who they're trying to, who they are really trying to force that baby.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, that was good. Every time it gets stuck in the conversation. That was good. Okay. So our next question, since we hit all the intersectionality. Yeah, we hit it all. I think we're gonna go into like our call of actions. So how can we, and this is for everyone on the panel, how can we as community act to promote and expand not only the right to abortion in our communities, but also reproductive justice in our communities? Like we talked about earlier, how can we promote and expand everything, the intersectionalities that sit within reproductive justice?
Well, I think first, understanding that reproductive justice is an expansive and inherently intersectional frame, and understanding what you mean when you say reproductive justice. Because like right now, a lot of people are using that term interchangeably with repro rights, and those frameworks are not necessarily the same. And I think that reproductive justice as a framework allows for many entry points. Allows for, they was like, I gotta go, but no. It allows for many entry points for people who might still be challenged by what they might feel the moral issue is. The reproductive justice gives you a place to understand that even if you fundamentally don't necessarily believe in abortion, you believe in bodily autonomy and that people should be able to have the right to make decisions about their lives. And so I think that is probably the biggest thing, is understanding what reproductive justice actually is.
Absolutely.
Something that you said in the past, Kenyatta, that really sat with me was the cultural shift in the conversation. And I think having those conversations with individuals or loved ones that you think might not be ready is so important and necessary. And it doesn't just mean abortion, it can also be sexual health. Have you talked to your husband or your partner about, the needs that you have every month and what that looks like for you and what that cost is for you? And destigmatizing the very intimate experiences that we all share is one way to bring reproductive justice into the fold, because I think when most break this conversation down, talk about these tenets, they'll come to an agreement. It's just having those conversations and, making sure that that discomfort can actually be something that's leaned into.
Yeah, definitely think that having the conversations are important, and connecting the dots during those conversations to help people understand how much bigger this is than simply abortion access. It's not just about abortion access, it's about the way we live our lives, because there is no one issue that stands alone.
Nope.
Every issue is intersectional. And when you look at all of the areas of our lives that this singular issue affects, you see that there's no way to separate it from anything else. So when you make those connections, then you have to think about, what am I gonna do about this? Because how do we even change what's happening right now? And so many people say, all right, go vote. But they don't tell you how to vote. So they don't tell you how to vote your interest. They don't tell you that when you look at the fact that legislators have the authority now, because the overturn of Roe versus Wade has left it in the hands of the state, you have to think about those officials who we vote for. So when you think about those positions that you're voting for, vote your interest. Who is for health care? Who is for child care? Who's for reproductive rights and reproductive justice? Who are the people that I can look to and be confident in knowing that they're gonna make decisions in the best interest of myself and my family? We have to know who's on the ballot. We have to know what they stand for. We have to know some of the things that they're about and what they've done if they're an incumbent. And we have to arm ourselves with that information, not only to go and vote, but that's the information that we have to look to share with people, because at the end of the day, it all goes back to our vote. Whether we want to acknowledge it or not, doesn't matter who says, oh, voting doesn't change anything. It can change a lot of things when you have the right people in office. So look to be able to vote every election, whether it's a primary or a general election, because it's the only way we change things. And quite frankly, primary elections carry a lot of weight that people don't even consider. True. Most people say, oh, I'll just wait till the general when I can make, my main decision. No. Because there are some positions that are only voted on during the primary. But then there are so many people who advance to a general election simply because enough people don't vote in the primary. So we have to help people understand how voting truly impacts them. That it's not just a social thing that's popular to do, that we're not just gonna talk about Martin Luther King and John Lewis and say, oh, go vote. They knew why voting was important. So when you see anything about voting, help people understand that, believe that voting doesn't make a difference, help them understand why it does. We have to educate, then we have to communicate to other people, and when it's time to mobilize, not only do we go and vote, but you partner with organizations who are out here doing something. Mobilize with those organizations that are saying, look, this is what we can do to change this. If there's a petition, sign a petition. We have a petition on your table that you can scan a QR code for this reproductive justice petition. Don't repo our repro. Don't take back our reproductive right. Don't miss out on what reproductive justice means to this community. Those are things that you can do. In all of your bags, there are the voter guides that Jasmine referred to. Somebody's gotta move, just move so we can.
Oh, is it a motion?
Yes, because nobody's moving right now. We may have to walk around for a minute.
It was about that time.
Yeah.
Oh, big talking.
But yeah, that's it, y'all. That's my spiel.
I know to make this quick, ruler.
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about policy things that we could do. Reproductive justice, as we've just talked about, is interconnected, different facets of many different communities' lives, and so it can feel like, well, how are you gonna pass a policy that touches all of it? You can't. And part of what we do when we're organizing for policy is we identify what the individual issues are in ways that, you know, we want to push for this, but we're going to do it in a way that meets this community's needs without harming that community. You need to actually organize to be able to do that. You need to get together and talk about how does this show up, this problem shows up in many different people's lives. Yes, there are, for example, I've talked about this policy before. We've been trying and waiting to pass policies that some of them have succeeded very recently. Some of them we are still waiting on legislators to get the political will up to pass that would meet some of these needs. One is finally, after many years of raising the alarm about maternal mortality, and especially the fact that there is such a racial disparity in those rates. The number one suggestion from experts after lots of research was you gotta expand Medicaid to cover access to health care for the full 12 months after birth. It took a long time to get that done. We finally got it done. Now, because, you know, half of the maternal deaths that happen in that 12-month period, they happen in the second 6 months. So now we have that. One piece that would really improve people's health care is if we did not shackle people when they were pregnant.
That's right. That's right.
Right now, we've got managed to pass a bill that says the second and third trimesters you can be shackle-free in your pregnancy if you're behind bars. But why is it not the first also? You can have a miscarriage if you trip over your shackles in the first trimester as well. You just shouldn't have to give birth behind bars. We, in general, I think all of our organizations are also trying to reduce the impact that jails and prisons have in our community, not have people behind bars, period, when they don't need to be. But why do you have to give birth behind bars? Why should you not be able to get prenatal care in the community and stay with your infant until they are at least 6 months, 6 weeks old?
Yeah.
And when you think about the fact that we don't even have that now, that makes me feel like, wow, our jail and prison system is that inhumane.
Yeah.
You know, some of these things are things that both legislators across the aisle say that they want, but they don't act on it, they don't move on it until it is politically expedient for them.
Absolutely.
Or one party will propose one thing and then the other party will say, we like the sound of that, but we're gonna cut it down and give people just half of what they really deserve. There's other things that we know it's gonna be a long ways until we win them, but they are still possible to do in policy. For example, a policy that says we are gonna repeal the 20-something abortion restrictions that have existed even before the overturn of Roe v. Wade, even before this 6-week ban. 20-something restrictions, one by one, that people didn't even know. They don't have to be there. That's not a medical necessity. That is a stigma and oppression. So we could repeal those with a bill. All of those things though, all the advocacy that we do is made more powerful when the legislators that's supposed to represent us know why we voted, right? And I know as a single voter, sometimes I feel like, well, I'm just one vote. Of course I'm gonna vote, but will it make a difference? But when I am one of a group of 10 voters that is all contacting our same person that represents our block and says, we are looking to you to do this. We voted for you and we need you to do this. Or I go to the candidate forums and I said, what are you gonna do on this issue? No, but actually, what are you gonna do?
Right.
That way they start to hear from us and they can't just be like, oh, I didn't know.
That's it. Showing up is so important. Whether we show up at their offices, show up in the Capitol, show up at town hall meetings, show up at anything they do and let them know, I voted for you, I'm holding you accountable, or you're my representative.
About joining an organization, that is the piece, right? Of doing it in numbers.
Because you don't have to go by yourself. That's the purpose of all of our organizations, to organize building power in community. Because we gotta remember that there are people who hold positions of authority, who make decisions that affect us, but the power is ours. Because we're the ones who put them in those positions of authority. That's it. We can take it right. In the words of my granny, we can make them unask those seats. And they are seats anyway. Our tax dollars pay for them seats. I don't care what desk they sit. That's right. I don't care what desk they sit at. You pay for that desk. You pay for them cushy chairs. You pay for that conference room and the table. You pay for the food they eat. You pay for the cars they drive. The insurance they got. The insurance that they got. You don't pay. So it's ours. We have to remind them that, hey, I put you here and I can take you out.
That is right. I say that all the time. We we are paying for them to have insurance,
Yes,
and
we
we
are.
ain't got insurance.
That is crazy.
Our tax dollars pay for it.
That is crazy. Okay.
That's right.
So they won't cut the lights off on us. We're
Yeah.
gonna wrap it up. I hope you all took the information that you heard today. I hope that you took it in, and I hope that you also go back to your communities and spread the information. NGP will be having the reproductive team, we have an outreach kit that we'll be putting together, where we're gonna have all these facts, how you find your legislator, how you request the meeting, how you talk about legislation that you want billed. We're gonna have all this in a kit, so you can take it and you can get a group of people together, friends, family, and you can go out into the community and advocate this issue with us. Again, this year is a very critical year because it is a voting year. It is probably one of the most, like Keanu said, I know we always say go vote, 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 but no, like this election, we gotta vote. We really have to vote because there are a lot of things that are on the line. A lot of the decision of how and when we have our families, how and when we have our families and the right to protect that is given to these people, given to these state legislators that are in these seats. And so it is for us to prioritize that we have people in this seat that represent what we stand for, and that's gonna also stand in line with us in protecting our bodily autonomy, right? What else? Also, you have the NGP Reproductive Justice Guide in your RJ kits. Take it, make copies. I have extra copies if you want copies, so you can spread it around. Again, on that guide, it tells all the seats that will be on the ballot this year and how, in some type of way, they see will affect reproductive health care or reproductive rights here in Georgia. Lex, did you have anything else you wanted to say?
I am so excited to hear, if it's not now, later, what brought you all here tonight, because it means a lot that you guys were a part of this conversation, and you are the change makers, and we're here to be supportive in Columbus and beyond.
Exactly. And also, yeah, I know we're wrapping up, but if you all wanted to stay around and you had questions that you didn't hear tonight that you want to see if we have answers for, please feel free to stay around as we clean up or whatever to talk to us. You're welcome to do that. We plan to have it in this whole conversation, but we just ran short of time. So if you have questions, yeah, please stay back and come talk to us.
I got a question.
Yes.
This, is this the only way we can sign the petition? I mean, I use another way. We'll walk through it
Together.
Yeah,
We'll walk through it.
She can walk you through it together.
I was gonna say, what brought me out is like, yes, I do work for NGP, but I've also been looking for very practical answers for what to do right now. A lot of organizations, they are holding like feeling spaces and talking about how upset they are about Roe v. Wade, but I want practical answers. Like, is it illegal to cross state lines? This right here, this is like a gold mine, things like this. Like a very practical, what do we do now? Not just the feeling spaces. Thank you so much for being here.
Can I mention, and it could be after any more questions, but about the local organizing that we'll talk about at the summit?
Yes.
Okay. More questions, comments, input?
Are you guys gonna do this again here?
Yes.
I think
If it's not a mass meeting, we're definitely going to be here in Columbus in some type of event capacity, but we'll definitely be back.
Yeah, and I think it's really great that this many people are here to talk about this tonight, especially on a Friday night in Columbus. I wanted to just share, Amplify, our organization. We were created by our founding organizations came together and said we need a space where we are doing things a little differently when it comes to protecting and expanding our access to abortion in Georgia and how it's being done. It's got to be done through a reproductive justice lens. But the seed of it was cities and counties are a place where lawmaking, for policymaking is so underutilized, especially in this area. Everybody thinks about the federal government, and then they think about the states sometimes. That is changing now. But 5 years ago, we did not think that it was going to be an easy road when we said, you know what? Cities can do more, and the city of Atlanta could help fund people's abortion care. Today, I was at City Hall watching the mayor sign a resolution that we finally passed to allocate budget money to the abortion fund that helps people travel to go get care. So anybody who's getting abortion care in Atlanta can draw on those funds, and if they need to leave the state, it won't just be people with means who are able to do it. That is really, really huge. 5 years ago, it seemed like a dream, but we were still talking about it because we knew they had the power. So now other cities are starting to look at that too. Counties are starting to look at that too. Y'all may have heard prosecutors around the state, counties around the state are saying we're not going to go after people or investigate pregnancies, right? So every city can do this. Columbus can do it too. And if anybody's interested in seeing like what kind of power can we generate to move stuff here in our local area, I really want to talk to you. And we're going to have an online conference on August 19th and 20th where there's going to be one of the sessions. It's just talking about how we did it, how we organized, and what we saw as the like, here was a setback. Here was the moment where everybody suddenly saw it happen in public, but we did all the behind the scenes stuff.
Also, you know, we not only did we get the resolution for the funds, but in 2019 we got the Reproductive Justice Commission passed in the city of Atlanta, and that's the first in the Southeast region.
Exactly, and that was really part of it.
And that was the beginning to get to where we are now. And right now, the DeKalb working group, which I'm a part of, is working really hard to hopefully get a resolution passed that will decriminalize abortion in the county of DeKalb.
Right.
So like working with your local government can be clutch, and actually will be clutch right now.
Yeah, I think cities around Georgia are going to be the way that we protect our people.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for
Thank
coming
you
out.
all. This was great. Take some food.
Yeah, take it with you.
You got to go place. I gotta fix my first.
Nice to meet you. Pretty good, pretty good.